So I want to begin again with a poem, as is my wont. I was a literature teacher for many years, a couple decades plus. And this is a poem that is written by a black woman poet named Elizabeth Alexander. She was a black academic when she wrote this. She was an assistant professor, which at the time I was also a professor. And, the awkwardness of lyric poetry, that poetry in the first person, most poetry that we know, the awkwardness and beauty of it, I like to think of lyric poetry as like the zazen of literature, because it's so immediately plunges you into the mystery of positionality. So I'm reading this poem that's written in the first person by a black woman poet. I'm obviously, maybe not obviously, but I'm not black, right? It was written in 2008, and it was read at Barack Obama's inauguration. So that's this other thing about the positionality of lyric poetry, is it's spoken in a particular place and time, and then we read it in whatever place and time we're in. And I don't know about you, but I remember that moment, January 20th, 2009. I was right here, in fact. We watched the inauguration on TV set in the other room. Another thing about positionality, these synchronicities that can happen. And I remember that moment particularly. You remember that whole hope and change thing? I want to read the poem today. I think it speaks how it speaks. Obviously, I'm speaking it in my voice. You're hearing it with your ears. And it really, for me, that the poignancy of this poem that was written at a time when we were talking about things like post-raciality. Remember that phrase? Our country was post-racial. Remember that moment? I don't mean to be glib. I actually mean to kind of find a way to touch on things that are kind of poignant, but to touch on them with lightness and hopefully something that feels a little bit like skillfulness. The thing about these lyric poems that bring us into the truth of positionality is they also invite us to encounter this mystery that in our tradition I think is most beautifully rendered in words that I only know in translation by Senjan, by Kanshi Sosan, by our third ancestor after Bodhidharma arrived in China, in the verses of Faith Mind, which some of you know very, very well, and that we recite on Tuesdays and Thursdays in the morning assembly. That poem ends with something that we think we know what he's going to say. He says, there is no past, no future. We're like, yeah, because it's all the present. He says, there is no past, no future, no present. We think, I think, many of us, that we know what it is to be in this position, in this moment, that it's in the here, it's in the now. I know what that is. There is no past, no future, no present. Where are we standing? Where are we sitting, here and now? That's the mystery, I think, at the heart of our tradition, and at the heart, I think, of what I want to talk about today. That's a lot of preamble for something that I'm going to say is the beginning of what I want to say, but don't worry, we'll get there. Okay, so this is Elizabeth Alexander's poem, Praise Song for the Day, a poem for Barack Obama's presidential inauguration. Each day we go about our business, walking past each other, catching each other's eyes or not, about to speak or speaking. All about us is noise. All about us is noise and bramble, thorn and din, each one of our ancestors on our tongues. Someone is stitching up a hem, darning a hole in a uniform, patching a tire, repairing the things in need of repair. Someone is trying to make music somewhere with a pair of wooden spoons on an oil drum, with cello, boombox, harmonica, voice. A woman and her son wait for the bus. A farmer considers the changing sky. A teacher says, "Take out your pencils, begin." We encounter each other in words. Words, spiny or smooth, whispered or declaimed, words to consider, reconsider. We cross dirt roads and highways that mark the will of someone and then others who said, "I need to see what's on the other side. I know there's something better down the road." We need to find a place where we are safe. We walk into that which we cannot yet see. We walk into that which we cannot yet see. Say it plain, that many have died for this day. Sing the names of the dead who brought us here, who laid the train tracks, raised the bridges, picked the cotton and the lettuce, built brick by brick the glittering edifices they would then keep clean and work inside of. Praise song for struggle, praise song for the day, praise song for every hand-lettered sign, the figuring it out at kitchen tables. Some live by love thy neighbor as thyself. Others by first do no harm or take no more than you need. What if the mightiest word is love? Love beyond marital, filial, national. Love that casts a widening pool of light. Love with no need to preempt grievance. In today's sharp sparkle, the winter air, anything can be made. Any sentence begun. On the brink, on the brim, on the cusp, praise song for walking forward in that light. Feeling a little choked up. What does this walking forward in that light mean? I think what I'm really asking is, how do we walk forward? How do we walk? How do we walk on the path? This is a great mystery, because the kind of present moment walking that Alexander in her poem suggests requires, in her telling, a strong spirit of advocacy, of standing for. So there's the line, "Say it plain, that many have died for this day." What is that dying for? What is standing for, walking for? What does that mean? In our path as Zen Buddhists, as people of the way, people who walk, people on the path, what does that mean? The title of my talk was taken from the words of Kanshi Sosan, our ancestor. He died in the 7th century, so these are old words. It says, "If you want the way to appear, be neither for nor against. For and against opposing each other, this is the mind's disease." For now a long time, maybe up until just a few months ago, every time I read verses of Faith Mind and came to lines like that, "Be neither for nor against," or the beginning, "The great way is not difficult if only you don't pick and choose." It was like this cosmic joke to me. Like when, the joke of like going to the doctor and saying, "Doctor, it only hurts when I raise my arm like this." And the doctor says, "Well, don't raise your arm like that." If you want the peace, the beauty, just don't pick and choose. It's like, yeah, I'm picking and choosing all the time. So how does this work exactly? Does that question resonate at all? It's like, it seems like a joke. Like, yeah, it's not difficult if you're not embodied in this human life, and thus you have no preferences, and you're neither for nor against. You're just so Zen, as they say. Now I'm realizing that, this isn't this neither for nor against. This isn't like a centrist path. This isn't a path of compromise, that our ancestors weren't advocating a kind of Switzerland life, right? A kind of neutrality. Nor is this impossible. Being neither for nor against is, I think, something else. And I think what's at stake here, is related to the very core of the Mahayana, of the great vehicle. One of the strongest insights in our tradition. This idea, we see it in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, that the Bodhisattva, people on this path, which is all of us, whether we know it or claim it or not, we beings of awakening that we are, we beings of the aspiration to wake up that we are, that we have no place to stand, that there's no place to stand, meaning that there's no way to be on this path and be pushing off against where I am here by leveraging myself against what's over there. So if you think about the Heart Sutra that we chanted earlier, all those no's, no eye, no ear, no tongue, not pushing off against anything, which doesn't mean, how do I want to say this? Being neither for nor against, taking no stand doesn't mean not taking a stand. It means standing. Does that make sense? It means here I am. I think of this, trying to make sense of this, in terms of two very different, very vivid understandings for me in my life. And I invite you to think about times in your life that you can connect with experientially what's at stake here, of that feeling of I have nowhere to stand. There's nothing I can push off against. I think of two very, very different types of experience that I've had. The first was falling in love. And I probably told this story before. I remember this one moment of falling in love with my husband early on in our courtship, and I was determined not to be in a relationship because I was coming out of a relationship. I was like, no. Been there, done that. I need some time to just be me, to just stand in my life as it is, come to know me. And I was listening to music at his house. He was doing that thing that when you're falling in love, you sometimes do, where you play all the songs that are your songs to your new lover, and you show them all the things that are your things, and you're like, here's this thing, here, look at this, look at my Tonka trucks. It's like being a kid again. Like here's all my toys, and he's playing me his music, and this like wave of vertigo came over me, and I was like, I think I left something on in my house, and I ran away. That sense of like the bottom falling out. I had a similar sense of falling when I came to Buddha-Eye and met this guy and heard the teachings here. It's like, holy crap. Like literally, holy crap, right? This kind of very like, there's nowhere to stand here. And that was very, very positive, those two kind of fallings. So positive. I knew I was in the market for that kind of vertigo. Other forms of that vertigo, not so freaking positive. And this is a little bit of a trigger warning. Have you all heard of Godwin's Law? I'm going to read you the definition of Godwin's Law. As an online discussion grows longer, the probability of a comparison invoking Nazis or Hitler approaches 1. Okay. So the trigger warning here is, I'm going to talk about Nazis and Hitler. So that there was this, what felt like this zombie apocalypse moment for me, November 6th last year, and I was in Albany again with my husband. Albany's a bit more red than Eugene. We were doing some shopping at a men's clothing store there, and right next door was this bakery selling cheesecake. It was just like, cheesecake, that's what we need. But we were both like, it was November 6th, and we're like, it was a lot. We needed sugar. So we went next door to the cheesecake store. And everyone was so nice and friendly. There was this beautiful, it was clearly a family-run business. There was mom, there was dad, there were kids, and they were so happy. And I thought, they're experiencing the day after the election differently than I am. And then I looked around the walls of the store, and keep in mind, I'm an interfaith chaplain. I've gone through strong, profound leanings toward Christianity. So I say this with really no disrespect for Christianity. But I realized that all of these affirmations that were on the wall, it was very Christian. It was coded very, very, very Christian. Like, begin with baked goods, end with Jesus. It had that sort of feel to it, right? I mean, literally, right? So again, I mean no disrespect, but I suddenly was like, Jewish, Zen Buddhist, bleeding heart liberal, holy crap, zombie apocalypse moment. Like, who are my neighbors? Where is my home? Who am I? And a more profound version of that kind of vertigo. I remember being in this hall during Rohatsu, so early December, that's last fall, and suddenly having this feeling of weird deja vu, but more spacey than that, where I thought, my family, my parents and their families were German Jews in the 30s, left in mid-century. This is mid-decade. That's why I exist. That's how I came to exist. And I looked at it and I thought, this is what 1933 felt like. Where am I? And then Zelensky in the Oval Office, and another form of that vertigo, the bottom falling out. Where do I stand? And is Russia our ally now? And this feeling of like, whose side am I on? Whose side are we on? Again, where do I stand? And what happens now? So here's what I want to say. Our current challenge, as I understand it, take one person's words for it. This is me talking from this position. Our current challenge, as I understand it, is not about how to take sides, but it's also not about learning how not to take sides. It's about learning how to live in the vertigo, in this vertigo. I think that's the spiritual gift of this moment, is it's laying something apparent that the Buddhas and the ancestors have been teaching about forever and ever, beginningless, endless time. So this moment is about learning how to live in the vertigo, which actually means that life is nothing but being here. Not taking sides, but being sided. Does that make sense? Being sided without reference to this side or that side. Nothing but being here, being sided without leverage on this side or that side. It means being completely here. A life of complete willingness. Like ante up. Time to put the chips all in. So for me, what that's meant is this weird idea that took hold in my heart. In that vertigo, this idea exploded in me, which started as, I just need to walk to Washington. On March 1st, I woke up that morning like, why aren't we barricading the streets and the building? I need to walk to Washington. I'm going to Forrest Gump it. I was like, literally, I'm going to Forrest Gump it. And I was like, oh, what's that? What just popped into my heart? And I'm a person who has ideas pop. I mean, like a big idea. If you've known me for any length of time, you'd like, oh yeah, Myobun. Yeah, okay, there's an idea. she's doing something. And so, like living with that, allowing that to breathe and air. And so the first question is like, what is this? Is this a march? And as I was talking about this idea in that first few weeks, it's like, what are you walking for? It's like, what are you protesting? What do you want? What's the outcome? I was like, it's not a march. It's a walk. I'm organizing a walk. The walk is the walk. This thing, which now it's a thing, which is interesting. And there's a lot, if any of you are interested, like the whole process of what that is in the vertigo, something emerges. The process has felt like, and here I've leaned on, on my Dharma friends, and I've leaned hugely on my teacher. This is why we have teachers, to like keep being encouraged, exhorted to take the backward step, and like just keep coming back onto the knife edge of self. Like here, this side, not against that side, this side. And as that process has unfolded, this thing has emerged. It's like, I now have founded a nonprofit. Like, how did that happen? Well, $4,500 later, you can form a nonprofit. That's one of the ways that happened. How does something emerge and become actual? It's actually quite fascinating and powerful and dharmically rich. I invite you to investigate this in your own lives, in all the things that you do. But I think what I really want to say is that out of that emerged the sense of this life of ours, step by step. It's an act of faith. Each of our moments is an act of faith. It's faith in heart mind. It's faith in awakening. It's faith in meeting the world step by step, like the footstep of the Buddha out on the stone. Right where we are, starting right where we are, and we never get past right where we are. It's a pilgrimage. Our lives are a pilgrimage, step by step. So the walk is a walk. The walk is the thing. It's not a means to an end. It's not even an end. It's just walking. One foot, other foot, other foot. Meeting each other, meeting myself, meeting this land, meeting we the people. Walk, walk, walk. And that kind of circular language of the walk is the walk reminds me of this phrase that became incredibly common and memeified and annoying in the early days of the pandemic. It is what it is. Which tends to mean, it is what it tends to mean like, it is what it is. It tends to mean bypass this moment. But what an incredibly profound phrase that is. It is what it is. At the very heart of that phrase is this four-letter word, the best four-letter word there is. What? What? This act of faith, step by step on the path, this opening of the heart. This is the heart of curiosity. It's also the heart of love, I think. And I want to close with another poem, short one. It's a poem by...
Could you tell people what you're doing?
Oh, yeah, like more specifically.
More specific, so they know.
I am leading a walk across America starting July 4th, going to Washington, D.C. It's going to take 5 months. It's 2,800 miles. It's 6.3 million steps, but who's counting? And I'm not doing it by myself, so I'm organizing this thing. Thank you.
And people are welcome to.
Yes, people are. Oh, it's so hard to do both a promo and a Dharma talk at the same time.
It's an advanced skill.
It is All right, and there are flyers out front, and I'm here. It's called the Liberty Walk. The nonprofit is called Liberty Walks, with the idea that, like, well, what does liberty do in times such as these? She walks. How do we activate the central core teachings of our nation state, but also I think of liberation? It's in motion. We meet. We encounter footstep on the ground, face to face. So we're going to be 149 hometowns where we're going to be hosted. You know, I'm sure we'll be camping out too, because there's not towns every 20 miles in the western states, as it turns out. It turns out America's big, y'all. So difference between doing this pilgrimage in this country and doing a pilgrimage in a place like Spain is America's freaking big. But we're walking. So lots to say about that. So the walk is the walk. And this idea of it is what it is, and the core heart of curiosity at the center of this orientation toward awakening. There's this poem, I mean, you know, I alluded to the fact that German Jewish heritage. Another, not a German Jew, an Austrian Jew, Erich Fried, whose family left Austria. He was about the age of my parents, so he was a little kid. His family left Austria in the 30s. His father died at the hands of the Nazis. But he went on to he settled in Britain, actually then moved back to Germany. Wonderful poet, political poems and love poems. And this is a brief love poem of his called It Is What It Is. Okay. It is nonsense, says reason. It is what it is, says love. It is calamity, says calculation. It is nothing but pain, says fear. It is hopeless, says insight. It is what it is, says love. It is ludicrous, says pride. It is foolish, says caution. It is impossible, says experience. It is what it is, says love. All the ways we want to name everything. Love just says what? It is what it is. It is impossible, says experience and other through hikers. And yet, 6.3 million steps. It is what it is, says love.